Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Pravina Khatri and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Swiftype. And joining me today is Jonas Lavoie, our Head of Product. Thanks Jonas for being here.
Thanks Pravina, thanks for having me.
So let's get started. I'm sure many of you saw Swiftype's new product announcement, which was a couple weeks ago, and it was our official launch into the enterprise search space. I know you're all here to see the product today, and we're going to be getting to that shortly. But for those of you who are new to Swiftype, I wanted to just give you a little bit of background about the company. Swiftype was founded in 2012 as mainly a site search provider, and we're backed by one of the top VCs here in the Silicon Valley, NEA Associates. We're headquartered in San Francisco with about 50 employees, and our customers range across a variety of industries. Many of our customers are on the webinar today, so thanks for joining us. And for those of you who are on the webinar, it really doesn't matter what industry you're in. Whether you're a university or a digital publisher, visitors who come to your website expect to find what they're looking for. And we believe that site search is an incredibly important part of that experience. And our thousands of customers agree with us too. So some of the names here on this slide you might be familiar with: TechCrunch, Okta, SurveyMonkey, NBC Universal, some great customer names. And one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight our customers on this slide is because you've played an important role in terms of our product strategy and our roadmap. We started to see more and more of our customers use our search platform for internal content versus public-facing content, which is ultimately what led us into our expansion into the enterprise search space. So in today's world, what we're seeing is that companies are using more and more cloud apps than ever before. And we do this at Swiftype as well. You're no longer just using Salesforce and Dropbox, but you're using Salesforce, Dropbox, Office 365, Google Apps. There are so many cloud apps that you're using today, and along with that come a lot of different problems that our customers have talked to us about. Companies that are using more and more cloud-based tools today basically have content that exists in multiple places, and finding that content has become extremely difficult for employees. So imagine if you have a new hire in the company and the many different apps that you give them access to. How can you expect your employee to find the right files and the right information that they're looking for? And that problem will lead to duplicating content, which is something that we hear a lot. I couldn't find what I was looking for, so I didn't think it existed, and I created it again. So that leads to a lot of time being wasted. And then we see some companies try and build it themselves, but they realize very quickly that the amount of resources required to do this just doesn't make sense. And so that's why we did it for you. And I'm proud to introduce you today to the Swiftype Enterprise Search product. So Jonas, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Pravina. Yeah, it's been an interesting ride for us to kind of look at some of the use cases that some of the customers here on the webinar have been kind of presenting to us, as well as some of the other use cases that we were introduced to as we were talking to prospects and people in the industry. So what we came up with here is a fully hosted, modern cloud-based platform that essentially uses the most modern technologies, both when it comes to indexing as well as relevance algorithms. Obviously, as Pravina mentioned, there are a lot of cloud platforms out there that are being used to store content or to create content for employees to collaborate with. And so what we've been building is essentially a way to consolidate all of the content that's being created across all of those sources and make it accessible from a single search bar. Now, that doesn't mean a single search experience, and we'll get into that. But obviously, part of the product that we're showing you today relies on our connector framework, which essentially allows you to connect any content repository that lives in the cloud really easily in just a couple of clicks, or any source that may be specific to you using powerful APIs and crawler-based indexing. Now, As I mentioned, we've built a suite of application that will help you reduce context shifting from finding or looking for content or information that may be necessary for the task at hand, and then getting to it. So trying to minimize the friction that exists there. So I'm not going to spend much more time on this, and we're going to jump right into our live demo. All right, so at this point, what we're looking at here is one of our search experiences. And what I'm going to do today is we're going to start by looking a little bit at the search experiences. So anyone who uses the search experience within your organization, or what we refer to as the end user or the employee. So we're going to look a little bit at all the search experiences that were built for those individuals. And then we're going to take some time to look at the management interface as well, so that anyone who is a search manager, an IT manager, anyone responsible for the rollout of the platform might have a better understanding of how we've actually handled that as part of the product. So I'm going to go ahead here and jump right in with the search experience. What we're looking at here is probably the most classic enterprise search experience that you might have been used to. It's a very powerful single search portal where you can essentially type in anything from a single search bar and start finding content across content sources. So I'm going to go ahead here and start typing in a query. And as you can see here, I'm suggested with a bunch of results that were a bunch of queries, sorry, that are specifically related to the content that lives in my index, in my various indices, so all the sources that I've indexed, as well as my search history. Now, I'm not really interested in this query here. What we're going to do here is we're going to look for an account here at Swiftype. And as you can see, what we're actually seeing is a bunch of results that are being returned from various sources and various types of content as well. So my first result here is an account on Salesforce, and then I've got some contacts for that account as well. And then looking a little below is help scouts or a help desk type of result that is being returned. So if I was to click on one of those results, then I'm presented with high-level information about this result. And then if I was to click through here by clicking on either the header or the bottom of the button at the bottom, then I would get directly to that, in this case, help ticket, and then I can interact with that. I can also look at other types of information here. Looking at the contact, I'm presented with relevant information at a glance. And again, there's this opportunity to jump right into the platform and access that content from anywhere. Now, this is a very simple query. Obviously, there's not a lot to it. It's also very generic. So why don't we go ahead here and make things a little more interesting. I'm going to go ahead here, and I'm looking for a product release document that was updated last month. Now, you may notice that I'm throwing a lot of information in that query. Now, Swiftype has developed something that's called advanced keyword detection, and essentially what this is our very own flavor of natural language processing that allows us to determine for every query which piece of the query is actually the relevance piece and which part of the query is actually the filtering piece. So you will notice here that updated last month and document were both highlighted. And what we do with this here is that if you look to your left, we automatically apply filters to that search query so that we can reduce dramatically the number of results being returned to you, keeping the relevance output to a maximum. So you don't have to sift through a bunch of results to kind of like try to make sense of what you're looking for. Now, this is the way we've been trained to search over time with powerful web search, and this is what we're actually bringing to the enterprise search world as well. Now, just to show you here as an example, if I was to remove updated last month, now suddenly I'm presented with more results for all the other product release documents that may have been created. Now I can go one step further and remove the document filtering aspect of it, and now I'm presented with way more results, and that is actually the results being presented here are just as relevant. The difference being is I'm not specifically now looking for documents, so you'll see that some folders are being returned, and then other types of content. So this is essentially what it looks like to search from a desktop experience with Swiftype. There's obviously the opportunity to filter it through sources. And so again, very classic experience, what you would expect from a fairly very powerful enterprise search experience on the web. Obviously, it's 2017, and a lot of us rely heavily on our mobile devices when it comes to work. and just productivity in general. And so what we've done is we've put a lot of effort into native applications, so both for iOS and Android, allowing anyone to have access to the same powerful search that we offer on desktop on their mobile phone. And there's a bunch of use cases, obviously, for that. You're in a hallway, you're trying to get to a piece of information, you're having a conversation with someone, or you're simply out of the office, you're on the go, and you need to access pieces of information that are relevant to a conversation that you're about to have, or you're thinking about something, you need to have access to that information. Or someone is asking you for a document and somehow they can't get to it because they either don't use Swiftype or they simply don't know the nomenclature or what the piece of content actually is. So they might reach out to you and ask you for the information. And if you're not standing in front of your computer, it might be hard for you to get to that information. Luckily, Swiftype is obviously delivered here with very powerful mobile experiences. Again, we can run interesting queries from here. I'm going to go ahead and type in a query that's kind of an interesting one here. I'm going to type in sitemap.xml, and this is a bit of an interesting query because it's going to yield all sorts of results. As you can see here, I have a bunch of bugs that are being returned, and I'm really just interested maybe in support tickets. So again, the filtering is also available here on our mobile experience. So I can go ahead and start filtering down by source, so that I'm now only presented with results that are related directly with a support ticket, and I can see which one is active, which one is not, and so on and so forth. Just jumping back really quickly here to our home experience on mobile, and same applies to the desktop experience, as you may have noticed. Swiftype has spent a lot of time developing AI technologies that essentially allows users to be presented with results even though they don't have specifically provided their intent. So what we do here is we're essentially returning results in a predictive fashion. So as you can see, the two first cards here are exactly that. So if I was to look at the second card here for your upcoming meeting, what we do is we actually evaluate the content found on a user's calendar. So we're actually looking at events. And based on that, what we will do is we will create a set of results that is specifically relevant to that event. So if I'm to click on this, now you will see that for this meeting, proposals meeting here with a company called ImageX, I have a bunch of results being returned that are directly related to that meeting. So it could be a checklist that I've created on Drive, also an initial agreement that we may bring with us. There's also information on Salesforce about this account and the other person that's going to be attending this meeting. So I don't have to go through all of my sources and trying to gather all that information as I walk into the meeting. It is proactively presented to me as part of the application. So this is a huge time saver, reduces the amount of friction when preparing for important conversations, for instance, dramatically. As you can see to the very top too, there's another card here that's recently updated by you. And if we know that you're actively working on a file, that there's a strong chance that you might want to get back to it fairly quickly without having to look for it or, try to remember which tab it is on Chrome that you have open that has this file. So you can go back to, your single source of truth, which is your Swiftype home experience here. Now, this is obviously, again, same type of experience, only optimized for a different kind of device. We actually took it one step further in that we wanted to really embed ourselves as part of various roles, kind of workflows. And so what we've built is Swiftype Focus, which is essentially an application that lives in your browser and will look at the pages that you're currently browsing. So if you're, in this case, here a sales representative, I'm looking at a Salesforce account page. What we do here is Swiftype will extract the content, some of the key signals from this page, and run various queries in order to return some of the most contextually relevant information that lives across your content repositories for that specific page. So here I'm on an Airbnb page on Salesforce, and if I'm to look to the right of the page here, you can see the browser extension being open, and in here we are provided with information or content or files, or maybe even help conversation. So right now I see that there is an active conversation with someone at Airbnb, and I can have access to it, and I have some level of visibility on what is happening on that front. So say I'm about to jump on a sales call with someone in the organization, I can refer to that support conversation if I have to, without having to jump or leave this experience in which I am, which is the Salesforce page here. So again, reducing dramatically the context shifting, reducing the proactive or the active gathering of information, and really letting the user discover information as they access various pieces of their or various aspects of their workflow or areas of their workflow. And again, this applies to files. This applies to conversations, people, contacts. So as much as Salesforce provide you some information, in certain cases, accessing it through the browser extension or Swiftype Focus is actually even easier and faster than to just have to sift through the entire page and try to figure out where the contact information might be found on that page. So that is one of the deeper integrations and one of the less traditional enterprise search client that Swiftype has built. There are other integrations, and this is a personal favorite of mine. It's one I used on a daily basis and even on an hourly basis, because I spend most of my time having conversations with people on collaboration tools, and obviously one of the most popular one out there is Slack. I'm sure a lot of you on this webinar are also Slack users. And oftentimes conversations involve finding files or referring to a piece of content that two people might want to collaborate on or whatever. So what we did here is we actually allowed users through the Swiftype command to search over content or pieces of information directly from the Slack interface. So I'm going to go ahead here and type in support contact at Samsung. So I'm having this conversation. I'm trying to reach out to someone in support at Samsung because we have issues or we're trying to have a conversation with them. And as I hit enter, you'll see that I'm now being returned results directly in the Slack interface to the people that are both, in this case, head of support at Samsung. And now, as I'm having this conversation, I can share this result in the channel with other people I'm interacting with. I can click on this link, and this is going to get me directly to that person's contact information. Now, one thing I want to highlight here, and something that we've briefly discussed before, the advanced keyword detection here is absolutely key, because in Slack's world, there is no opportunity to essentially use the UI elements to start filtering down on the results. So if I was to go ahead and type in the same query but remove the contact keyword from that query, I'm going to go ahead and type in support at Samsung. We will get very relevant results, but then we also get additional results because I'm not specifically asking or looking for contacts. So I'm going to have very relevant support information or support conversations in my help desk software, or I will have some information around the Samsung account, but it's not specific to contacts. So you can imagine that in a world where you know exactly where you're looking for, if you're looking for a file and you don't want to have a lot of result being returned as part of your Slack experience, you can start using those triggers or that keyword detection as part of the way you search. And it's a very natural way to search in the first place. So I think that is a pretty good high-level overview of what the various search experiences are when it comes to Swiftype. I want to take some time to jump in and look at the more of the admin side of Swiftype, and essentially a site or a search manager or an IT professional may spend more time in this area here as we talk about the various functionality here. So obviously, good search comes with, is only as good as what you index, so the content you index and how you index it. What we've built at Swiftype is obviously a connector framework that is incredibly powerful, is also incredibly simple to use from a setup perspective. And there's this concept of shared sources versus private sources. And the easiest way to kind of like present these is a shared source is essentially a content repository that is used by everyone within your organization or your team, and for which everyone on the team could actually use a shared set of credentials. So it could have access to all of the content with the same levels of permission. That can be set at the organization level, and this is incredibly powerful because that's the easiest way to set a search experience for the entire team that you want to roll this out to. There's also this concept of private sources. Again, private sources are sources that can be used across the organization, but for which the content that is available to a user will vary dramatically from one user to another. So good examples of that will be, for example, Google Drive um, or Dropbox, in which I might have some of my very own work content that is only stuff I've been working on myself, and then files that are shared across the organizations, or files that are shared across a subset of that organization. And so this is how essentially all permissions are being handled, and ensuring that not only the files and the content can only be accessed by people who have authorized access or the proper authorization to get to that content, but also creates a highly personalized experience for every single user, which increases obviously engagement and stickiness with the product, because now the relevance model is applied directly to their specific use case and not the entire organization. So this is very powerful because it allows you to create highly personalized and highly engaging search experiences for every single person in your organization. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you how easy it is to connect a source with Swiftype. In this case, you see here a list of connectors that are supported out of the box. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to connect Google Drive. And essentially what we see here, a couple of clicks, just making sure that I'm using the right account and allowing the connection. And boom, my Google Drive is actually now connecting, and we are now currently syncing the content. Indexing times will obviously, and syncing time will obviously vary greatly from source to source, but we're thinking in certain cases it will be a few seconds, certain cases it will be a few minutes, and it's incredibly quick, depending on the amount of data that you may have for those content repositories. So obviously we support a lot of those major cloud platforms that you may be using, but we also are more than aware that there might be applications that you've built yourself internally, or you may be using legacy platforms that are not as popular, but still very key to your own business. And for that reason, what we've built is a very robust API that can be used. And so essentially, when you create a content source or a custom API source, what you do is you start indexing or pushing content directly to that endpoint, and this source will live as its own entity. So if you have 3 applications internally that you want to live as content sources for your search experience, you may connect these as 3 different custom API sources, and that information will live as part of those custom API sources as defined in Swiftype. So that's what it looks like to connect a source, and that's what it's like to interact with content sources from a management perspective. Obviously, you probably want users searching with you. So there's this entire user management interface that allows you to invite users to your organization. And essentially, the way this works is as you add people to your organization, invitations are being sent out to the members of your organization. And as they accept invitations, they're also themselves kind of like brought onto this onboarding process that really seamlessly helps them connect any private source that they might be willing to use, or that you may let them connect based on the source restrictions that you may apply to your organization, and also sets them up really quickly with their search experiences, and informs them about our mobile apps and whatever. So there's a lot of that heavy lifting that is done directly by Swiftype. So for you as a search manager or as an IT professional, it's very low touch when it comes to rolling this out to your organization, and the application does a lot of that work for you. Jumping in here into the analytics section. Obviously, you have a lot of content, you have a lot of users, and you probably want to make sense of it all. And the analytics platform is not only great to understand how people use the product, but it also helps you identify some areas of the business where content creation might not be as efficient as you'd like it, or there might be content missing, or there might be a business process that seems to be generating a lot of friction, and people are constantly looking for the same kind of information. And that's something that could be fixed upstream with the business process itself and not necessarily with the content that you're creating. So this is what the analytics platform will provide you in terms of information. So this really becomes kind of like a business intelligence hub, but in ways that you're looking into people's queries, understanding the engagement, where people work, what kind of content they engage with as well. They might be looking for something, but if they're not clicking through to any document, there might be an issue with the way the content is being displayed or the way the content is being created within your organization. So a lot of information can be found in the analytics suite. Obviously, something that is incredibly powerful and that has had a lot of attraction with people already using this product, have been really enjoying the analytics suite part of the product. Other areas in which obviously we have invested is security and the ability for you to really control who has access to your search experience. So that could be either through IP restriction. So if you want to limit the search experiences to be available only through, say, your Office network or your VPN, that is something that can be easily managed from here. There is no heavy operational deployment process for that. This is all handled through this interface right here. Also enabling source restriction, so allowing certain users to use certain sources from a private standpoint based on their role. Are they in the sales organization? Are they on the marketing organization? Are they part of the product and engineering team of your organization? So this can also be managed from here. And last but not least is obviously some customizations that can be done with Swiftype. So there's this ability to add your very own branding so that the experience also feels a lot more like your own. And this is key to a lot of people because they really want to make sure that people engage and interact with the product as if it was their own personalized experience, which truly is. So it makes a lot of sense to let your team and your organization kind of like brand it the way you want it to look like. So I think this pretty much covers. This is very high level, and we're happy to answer questions around this demo, either through the Q&A panel here that you will find on your right, or individual questions as well. But I'm going to switch it back to Pravina, and I think we might have questions already in the pipe.
Yep, we do have quite a few questions coming in, so we're going to do our best to get to these here in the next few minutes. And so we might go a few minutes over here. So one of the questions coming in, will Swiftype respect document level security from the source? So for example, I have access to document A, but not document B. Will document B show in the search results for me?
So no. So essentially, and that is the subtlety of shared sources versus private sources, and this is how we handle permissions. But the important part to understand is that if an individual user does not have access to a file on that content repository, then they will not have access to that file either through the search experience. And that is the whole concept of shared sources versus private sources. And that's exactly why we've built in such ways to ensure that there is no bleeding into content that might be in a weird state where something was shared with you, but then those permissions were revoked, and then that was not updated properly when the content was being sent to us, and that kind of stuff. So that's why by really building it into private versus shared, that allows us to really enforce permission levels user by user, and that is definitely an advantage.
Great, thanks. Let's see, the next question, we have an internal wiki that's not public facing. How would Swiftype connect to that?
So there would be two ways to go about it. If your wiki is is web-based and is simply behind, say, a firewall or authentication, then we can use Swiftype's powerful crawler to go through that content and index that content. So that is very low friction on your end, obviously, because there's literally nothing for you to do. Now, if your internal wiki is not web-based for any reason, it's a database or that kind of stuff. Now we can essentially index that content using APIs. So the custom API source would be a very, very good example of or the internal wiki that's not web-based would be a super interesting use case for the custom API source for that matter. And again, like internal wikis are usually powered by platforms such as Confluence. And if this is what your internal wiki is, then you can use the Confluence connector, which is already provided with Swiftype.
Okay. Great. And either of us can probably take this one, but how are you different than Google Cloud Search? Do you want to take that?
Sure. I mean, we're different and we're similar in certain ways, but we're similar in that we're both cloud search providers, and we're different in that we integrate with many third-party platforms, and the flexibility is obviously way better when Swiftype with like the API sources and the crawler-based sources and all the connectors with some of the most, Dropbox and some of the most famous platforms out there. Right now, Google Cloud Search platform is limited to the Google products, and that is a major difference. And for us, Google Drive and the Google ecosystem, the G Suite ecosystem, is a drop in the ocean of all the other content sources that we also support.
Yeah, I think it's really similar to Microsoft's Delve app, which has kind of existed for a while. Where you can search across data across Office 365, but not any other platforms. So definitely solving a different need than Swiftype. Let's see, and then let's take one more question, and if we don't get to your question, again, we'll follow up with you right after the webinar. What does implementation look like?
Well, implementation, so implementation is obviously I think the greatest thing about Swiftype is that there is very little implementation work required in a lot of cases. If you're already using all those cloud platforms that we support out of the box, implementation is literally signing up for an account, connecting those sources, and sending out invitations. And that's as simple as it gets. So we're talking here rollout in just a couple of days. And some of you might have been burnt in the past with enterprise search releases and rollouts that have been over a few months, if not years in certain cases, and we've heard horror stories on that front. But obviously, if you have some custom sources, there's nothing refraining you from actually connecting all the cloud platforms that are already supported out of the box and starting inviting users. But then over time, add sources to your search experience, and that also helps with building engagement and stickiness within your organization. You don't have to wait for everything to be ready and then run updates on hardware that you have to maintain over time. This is a cloud platform, and features are being rolled out on a very regular basis, and you are always on the latest and greatest version. And that is definitely an advantage when it comes to implementing, indexing content, but also rolling out the search client and experiences. You can download the mobile app right now from the App Store if you want to. You have access to the search experiences directly from your account as you sign up. So those are all things that are not right now available, and we're essentially the only ones like approaching it this way at this point.
Great. Okay, well, we definitely want to be respectful of your time, so thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Jonas, for taking us through the demo. It's great. I want to point out that we have a 7-day free trial available, and I encourage you to sign up for that. You can find it right on the homepage of our website. And if you'd like to schedule a more personalized demo, please feel free to find that on our website as well. One of our representatives will be reaching out to make sure that we address all of your questions, and if you think of any additional questions, we'll make sure to get those answered as well. So again, thanks so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.